Okay, welcome to Clear Minds Podcast. I'm here today with Dan. Dan, nice to see you.
Good to see you, Carlo.
Yep. Um, yeah, I know Dan for about 9 months now, and actually he's been my sponsor. And yeah, we'll get into it. We got a couple questions about personal journey, ups and downs, and long-term sobriety. And yeah, here we go. So the first one's maybe about a personal journey and. What led you to AA initially?
Initially, I actually had some problems in high school. I thought I was just having fun and hanging out with my buds and being a normal kid. And then when I got out of school, I would settle down and go to college. I ended up going to the University of Florida after I got out of high school. But when I graduated from high school at the senior prom, final party of the school year, I got a little carried away and got bombed. And people started saying, "You drink too much," and I laughed it off. I said, "Hey, I'm young, I'm dumb, I'm having fun, and at some point, this is just a phase I'm going through, and I'll straighten it out." So this went on. I got out of high school at this party, and I was acting goofy, and a lot of people told me. They said people were coming up to me, and they were saying, "Dan, you drink too much, and you and your friends think everything's a big joke." And I said, "Hey, we're like, remember this was back in the days, like anyways, this was back in the 70s, okay, late 70s, this was 71. And basically I got out of that and decided to, someone came up to me and they said, "Why don't you go to Fort Lauderdale's men's group?" And what's that? The Fort Lauderdale men's group is a big AA place. It was at St. Mark's Church down in Fort Lauderdale off of Federal Highway. And anyway, so I went and they told me, and I said, "What do you guys do? Everyone's telling me to come here." I really wasn't sure. I didn't know what AA was. I came from a big family, but nobody in my family had a drinking problem except me. And I went to it went in there, and so they were telling me all this stuff, and I said, "What exactly do you guys do?" And they said, "Don't you know?" And I said, "Yeah, everyone told me to come here. This is Alcoholics Anonymous." I mean, I was like, "Oh, I'm in the wrong place. They must have made a mistake. I don't belong in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm just having fun." But they said, "Why don't you come back and try it for a while?" They were very friendly to me, and I did go back several meetings, and they said, "Well, so how are you doing with your drink?" And I said, "Well, I'm learning to control it." And they said, "Well, we're not about control, because if you're trying to control your drinking, you're out of control." Mm-hmm. That's what they told me. And at the time, I was like, no, that's not true. I said, "I'm too young to be an alcoholic." And I just kept doing what I was doing. I came back, and after a few more meetings, they said, "We had a meeting, and you're not allowed to come to meetings unless it's an open meeting, because we're here to stop drinking. You're getting up and raising your hand and saying, 'Well, I'm learning to control it.' We don't want that kind of talk in here, because we got too many sick people in here that really need to stop. And me, I'm in there. Oh, yeah, I'm learning to control." And it was just foolish, because trying to control it is, you're admitting, you're basically almost screaming, "I'm out of control." When you say, "I'm trying to control it," you either control it or you don't control it. You don't try and control it, if you're not a real alcoholic. So I quit going to so many meetings, and this went on for quite a while. In fact, all during my 20s, I kept going back to meetings. I'd go to the open meetings, or I'd hide in the back and get thrown out and stuff like that. And that's how I started my AA career. And I thought that, no, I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to meet the right woman, and I'll start my own business. And I had all these grandiose ideas, which, of course, alcohol screwed up every one of them. Mm-hmm. And so I really didn't get serious about AA until someone said, I started going to the Fort Lauderdale men's group in the 101 Club in Pompano, and eventually started going to more meetings and getting more involved. And they were like, "What have you got to lose? Try it for 90 days. Try our way for 90 days instead of your BS way of, well, I'm not a real alcoholic crap." You walk into a meeting and you're basically screaming, "I've got a problem." Mm-hmm. I tell everybody that's your first step. When you step across the doorway, that's your first step, because you're admitting that you've got a problem. You're seeking out Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what the rest of the people out there think, or you, but What do you?
Yeah, I think we have some similarities there. I think my drinking started in high school, and actually, I didn't get to go to prom due to it.
Mhm.
And just like in my family, I seem to be the only one with uh, a drinking problem, and I was thinking like, how am I the special one? Um, and I think something at least space too is try to control drinking, and like you said, if you have to control drinking, then most likely you got an issue.
Yeah,
if
you're
you
out
try
of
to
control.
if you're out of control. So what was early sobriety like for you?
Early sobriety?
Early sobriety.
Well, early sobriety, I tried the 90 meetings in 90 days, and I actually liked it.
Hmm.
I realized by that time they're right and I'm wrong. I've got to do something about this. I can't continue to go on these binges, and I was basically a binge drinker. I didn't drink every day. I would not drink for a couple of weeks. I'd white knuckle it and like, oh God, and I can't wait to drink, but I got to do this work. I got to do. I started my own business. I worked at a couple of different firms. I went to the University of Florida, almost got kicked out, almost got arrested. Um, we put on a concert. A bunch of guys. We were talking one night. We said, "Hey, we could probably throw a concert in one of the auditoriums at the place I was at." And what happened is they said, "Well, we have to move a bunch of equipment." And they called some people and they said, "Hey, we know a band that said they'd come over here and play right now." So we started running around telling everybody we were going to have a party, an impromptu party, and we were going to bring this band over. And all these dormitories, this was during, I forget, there was like a long weekend that weekend, and everyone started coming over. So they said, we need to get the heavy equipment, the guys with the big, machines and all that stuff, and to play. So I went.
Were you part of the band, or were you?
No, I was
Okay.
just part of this. I was a floor advisor, and I worked my way. I worked at the front desk, and the funny thing is we went to we went and borrowed one of the university's trucks.
Okay.
A friend of mine said, "Hey, I work in maintenance, part time to help me go through school." And he said, "I got the key to where the trucks are. They leave the keys in them." We went there. We took a truck and we moved the equipment. And of course, the next thing I hear that they're going around saying that I stole a truck from the university, even though we put it back the next, right away after the thing, like early in the morning. It got it set up so it looked. We thought no one would know. But somebody told her, said, yeah, the truck was gone last night. Where did it go? That guy over at, BD Towers took one of the trucks. It was me, which is me and a buddy like you, a couple guys like you. We all were laughing and drinking, thinking this is a lot of fun. The band went off. People came and they said, this is one of the best concerts we've had here. And I was like, we've had all kinds of famous groups at the University of Florida. And a lot of it had to do with drinking. Oh, at the concert, I came out to introduce everybody. This is another cue that I had a real drinking problem when I was in Gainesville. This was back in the 70s, 75, 76.
Mhm.
Opened the stage up, and they said, and our announcer's Dan, and I come walking out, and I'd been drinking, and I walked out, and the microphone was at the end of the stage, and I walked right past it and fell into the audience. I bounced off a table. There was a group of girls sitting there. They screamed, and everyone else was laughing, thinking that was part of the joke or something. But I actually got knocked out.
Oh my gosh.
Not a heavy knockout, but I bounced off the table and they screamed and everyone else started laughing. And then the friends of mine jumped off the stage and they were like, da 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 da, and they picked me up. They carried me, dragged me through the audience, and everyone was laughing and clapping and everything. I woke up the next day and was like, when's this concert start? They said, Dan, it's over. They said, you were spaced out. You were talking foolish. Obviously, you've been drinking before that because you were half in the bag and, you didn't snap out of it till this morning. And I was like, I do have a problem. And that was in the 70s, in the mid 70s. And I thought, I got to get a hold of this. That's when I started this controlled drinking bullshit. But
Yeah.
I just had to throw that in there because it's another indicator. It's like when you start seeing these crazy things you're doing, pay attention. I mean, I was like, come on, I'm only 20 something years old. I'm having fun.
Yeah, I think that's like me too. I wasn't drinking every day, so I didn't think I had a problem. But when I drank, I drank binge drink, and I drank till I blacked out, and most likely didn't remember what I did or what happened. But yeah, that's a good story. Did you ever get in trouble for the truck?
Well, they called me in, and the advisor, the guy who was running our section of the thing, he sat down and he said, you know, Mr. Dan, he said, this is serious. He said, I could have, we're thinking of having you arrested. I said, for what? He said, for grand theft auto. And I said, I didn't steal it. We borrowed it. He goes, you borrowed it? He goes, by whose permission? I said, someone who, I don't want to think on a guy, say, he said, we got a truck. But I said, it's not like I stole it. I told about 20 people that we're going to do this. It wasn't just me either. I mean, I had be like you and me and half a dozen other guys were involved. But anyways, that was a big tell. You start getting these tells. I mean, if you play poker, you have tells. One of the tells is you're out of control, man. You do really off the wall stuff, and not funny anymore.
Yeah. So my next thing, was there any turning points in your recovery that you experienced?
Well, I when I got out of college, like I said, I kept trying this so-called controlled drinking, which was out of control. Trying to control it, you're out of control. I'm going to keep saying that because people come in like, well, I don't drink that much. Well, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got a different level.
Yeah.
But I kept doing that, and in the early '70s, I had worked for a company, and they let me go. I don't know if it was because of my drinking or not. The company failed later on, and they got involved in some legal problems. So I thought part of it was whatever they were up to, but I blamed a lot of it I didn't know what I wanted to do because I had a real prestigious job. I wore a three-piece suit to work every day, and I was doing a lot of things and try and control drinking. But then, and so when that happened, I started drinking really heavily, and I just thought it's time to do something. And I started going to meetings, the 101 Club and Fort Lauderdale Men's Group again, and different clubs and stuff like that. And like they said, what have you got to lose? Try it for 90 days. There's getting sober and there's staying sober. And getting sober is tough.
Yeah.
But staying sober is not that bad. It gets easier as time goes on.
I agree. I definitely think it gets easier. And now that you're talking about that, maybe we'll talk about the AA culture. And how would you say, has AA changed since you first joined?
A little bit for me because I came in through the Fort Lauderdale Men's Group. It was an all men's group, and they were a little bit different than some of these mixed meetings that I go to now. I'll go to places where it's pretty much mixed, and I noticed that it's become more religious, in my opinion. I mean, they always were. They believe in God and everything, but now God's going to do this for you. God's going to do that for you. I don't want to sound cynical, but I tell people, I said, God will do for you what you cannot do for yourself, but God's not going to do for you what you can do for yourself. Why would God do that? Why would God create us and then do everything that we need done, like we're a bunch of babies or something? And I say that a lot more now than I did, years ago. I never said that, but I started realizing, like, wow, these people are like, well, go to God and do this, and God will come down. I said, yeah, God's good old God. He's like a little Casper the friendly ghost or something. He's always around, helping out, doing stuff. But I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody's beliefs, but I'm saying I believe in God, that part of it, but it kind of annoys me a little bit.
So for me, I feel like you said, God will do what you cannot do, and then it's up to you to do the rest.
Correct.
I know for me that when it was a battle trying to stop drinking, and I couldn't. I physically, mentally felt like I could not do it alone myself. So I had to make just failure after failure after failure until one day, I just, prayed and prayed to remove the obsession of wanting to drink. And I felt like something then, was lifted. And, it's just like a feeling that, I don't need it. I don't want it. And then from going forward, I felt like I had to put in the work, like you said, to go to the meetings every day, the 90 and 90, find a sponsor, put in the legwork to do it, and continue to work on it. But was there any moment like that you had where, maybe the obsession was lifted for you through higher power of God? Or would you say that you just made the decision and turned it off?
No, when I came in, this was probably in the early, because I had gone through the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and then I thought I got to get serious about this, or I'm just going to be moving from job to job. They found they'll get hip to my drinking eventually and get rid of me. So I thought I've got to learn to control it. My father used to say to me, not regarding me, but to a friend of his that had a drinking problem. He used to tell him, he said, "Kill it or cure it, because you're going nowhere." This guy was an attorney, and he said, "Kill it, kill your problem with your alcohol, or cure it, because you're just always going to have a problem." And he said that to me one time. And I said, when I had a few drinks last night, Dad. And he goes, "Dan, kill it or cure it. You know what you have to do." And I was like, he didn't say go to AA, because I don't know if he had that much admiration of AA or thought it was that successful, because he knew other people that had drinking problems, and they were in and out type of thing. But I came to AA and I thought, try it for 90 days. I said, heck, I go sometimes a few weeks without drinking, and then I'll go on a bender. So I thought, yeah, I should be able to do that 90 days, and see what happens, and follow their instructions. The people that I respect, the people that I met in AA, not everybody's, but I started. They said, come to as many meetings as you can, hang out here as much as you can, and ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions, and hang out with people you admire their sobriety. Listen to what they have to say. So I did, and I saw it was working for them. And I met people that had 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of sobriety. I was impressed, because I was thinking, AA was like you stayed sober for a few weeks, and something you fought your whole life. But they were like, no, it's abstinence, man, total abstinence.
Yeah.
Kind of bothered me, but it worked.
Yeah, and a couple things there. So would you say that you killed it or cured it? And
for about 7, 8 years, I was doing really good. I came to, I had felt that I had it under control, and cured. When I say under control, that I, had gotten rid of it. But that it didn't happen, because one night I was at a meeting, and everyone was talking about God's going to do this and God's going to do that, and I jumped up this was after like 7, 8 years in the program. I had no real desire to drink anymore, which it tells us in the big book, in chapter 6 of the big book, into action. By this time, sanity will have returned and all that stuff. And I had read the big book 2 or 3 times during my 7, 8 year clean run there, and I had started my own business and things were going good. But I went back out. I just got pissed off one night, and I thought, I could probably have a drink. With everything I know, AA's taught me all this stuff about alcohol. I thought it would be simple to stop drinking on my own. But what I found out is AA is a we program. I get drunk, we stay sober. It's called the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's involved, just what we're doing right now. That's what keeps me sober, really, is people like yourself and others, and Alcoholics Anonymous, and sharing with each other. And as far as I believe in God. I know God has a hand in this too, but God, I don't think God's there to be our den mother or any of that kind of stuff. And, that we have to take it. What's that saying? When I was a child, I thought like a child, I talked like a child, I acted like a child. But now I am a man, which for me meant now you are sober. You're sober. You know where it's at. Stop it, Dan. And I did stop it first. And then I tried controlled drinking again for about 3 or 4 years, and it just gets old really fast. I started seeing myself going downhill again, and I thought, can't do this. I haven't had a drink since. I'm in my 27 and a half years right now. So it's working really good. And my favorite parts of the book are doctor's opinion, where he says it's like an allergy. I believe that. I brought this up at a meeting yesterday, and people were like, well, it's not really like an allergy. I said, so Dr. Bob does, yeah, they don't know what they're talking about, but you guys do, or what? It's like an allergy, because if you don't drink, you're not going to get drunk. So something outside of yourself is making you to go back for a second drink, in my opinion.
Now, you mentioned just a couple minutes ago abstinence from alcohol, and a new thing that their AA recovery has adopted is abstinence versus harm reduction. And you also mentioned the allergy. What are your thoughts on that? I don't know about harm reduction. I don't know that if that would work for me. I think abstinence from alcohol would be um, better for me. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you think about that.
I agree with you on the abstinence. I mean, you just heard my story. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
battled it, I fought it, I came up with all kinds of my own theories. And I think that the best thing is just, surrender to win.
Mm-hmm.
Why keep fighting something when it's not, it's not working, and just permanently?
Yeah.
Why fight it when, and everyone's like, why don't you just try it our way? I said, because I see too many guys with 10, 20, 30 years of sobriety, they're still talking about fighting a drink. That bothers me. The way I read the big book and Bill Wilson and everything, by now the problem has been removed,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I'm like, that was after Bill wrote that, after 4 or 5 years of sobriety. And I'm like, well, if the problem's been removed, then why should I be fighting alcohol? I'm not fighting alcohol today. I don't think about it. I rarely think about it. And when I do, I almost laugh about it. I'm like, I'll see a poster or something, try our beer or something like that. I'm like, yeah, it would be kind of fun to have a beer or two. And then I think, no, I always go back to whenever I have a thought, remember your last drink. And I said, what happened the last time you drank, Dan? And then I go,
Mm-hmm.
no, I ain't having a beer. Done.
Yeah.
I'm getting older. I have, a daughter. I have other things. I got married. My wife died. I've been through a lot of things, but I've been married twice. Both my wives have passed away. Different things. They both came down with really horrible diseases. And the funny thing is, here I am, with all the goofy stuff I've done. And I'm like, I'm still walking around. So I'm just saying, I've been through a lot, but here I am.
What parts of the program have been most meaningful to you? Now, I know you mentioned earlier, the fellowship. And speaking of one, a fellow member, is there anything else, or is that you think the main?
I think it's the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it's the people. In fact, I said something, like I say, again, a few days ago at a meeting, I said something about there is a God. And I said, how do I find God in AA? Through all of you. Because every one of them brings something to the table, and I listen to their story. And what people are speaking, I'm trying to analyze it, in my head, like, well, what does that mean to me? And I realize that, God speaks through, it's like what you're doing right now. You're doing God's work right now. You're spreading the message. You're, giving this speech of hope, growth, and recovery where people can come into here, find out why they did these things, that they're not alone. That's why I'm sharing some of the stuff I've done, because a lot of people said, Dan, you're going to go far in life. I was a good student. I was involved in drama when I was in high school. I was partying back then, and they didn't do, I wasn't drinking as much then, but they had back in the 60s, they had LSD and things like that, other drugs and barbiturates. And, I played with some of that stuff and drinking. You mixing that all together, I think it's suicide. Like they say, alcoholism is suicide on the installment plan. I believe that to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And you over the years you've seen people where, oh, so and so's not going to be here anymore. Why not? Oh, he died in a car accident last night when he's drinking. It's like, here today, gone tomorrow. But here we are.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Because this is something that I wish. Like you mentioned earlier, you had a period of sobriety there, where it felt like you were white knuckling it through that time, and that's how I was too. I didn't really understand addiction. I didn't understand alcoholism. So maybe this, if anything, just give understanding to people who may be experiencing that, or sober curious, or just understand what else somebody else is going through in that. So, are there any parts of the Big Book or 12 Steps that resonate more with you now than they did before?
Well, like I say, chapter 6, into what is that? Into action,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But that part where he says, by now sanity will have returned, we recoil, and that hits me a lot, because I recognize what we have is truly a condition. I wouldn't call it a disease. It's not a disease like cancer that keeps. It can get worse if you feed it, with alcohol and drugs. But the thing is that what that's taught me is that, well, there is a God. I believe there's a God. God works through all of us and delivers a message through all of you. Something I really don't understand, but it works. And that if I want to stay sober, I have to completely avoid alcohol. And like I say, I don't have that. I don't have that obsession or mental I don't have. I mean, I hear people today saying, "Don't you ever think about taking a drink?" And I'm like, I'll think about it and I'll get rid of it right away
Hmm.
because it's not part of my life anymore. Like I say, I'll have 28 years what is it, later this summer,
Wow.
and I don't even remember. You know, people say, "Well, don't you remember your last drunk?" I'm like, that's pretty fuzzy,
Hmm.
dude. You know, you can't go on a 5 day drinking binge and you wake up and know what day it is. Even you know, I was like walking around for the next week, going like, "Where are we?" You know. Who knows why I did that? Maybe I tried drugs or something, but I lived through it. Which is kind of a miracle in itself because, like I said, I've had some health issues, and I'm like, yeah, man. I mean, to me, alcoholism, what it does to people like us, if you have the allergy, it's suicide on the installment plan.
Yeah.
And then why even take that risk?
And I think that's the same for me too. Like you mentioned, you'll see a billboard or something with alcohol on it, and maybe for a second you say, "Oh wow, a drink would be nice," and then like you similarly, I laugh in my head and think, "No, that wouldn't be nice,"
No,
because I
it
think
wouldn't
of
be
that
nice.
snowball
But
of
that you're showing recovery
yeah.
because you know you're thinking the right thing. Like, yeah, it would be nice if I could take a drink or two,
Hmm.
but it's not nice because
I can't take it.
take one or two drinks, it's Katie bar the door, and you know it's off to the races, and who knows how it's going to end.
Hmm.
And I've been in too many meetings where someone came in and said, "Oh, by the way, so and so died last weekend because he got drunk and ran into another car, but you know died." And it's like, huh? You know, someone like yourself that I knew, you know, people like that. I've had a few people happen to me a few times over the years, and it's you know, it's kind of
Yeah.
like a gut punch, you know.
So how do you feel about sponsorship and what that role meant to you?
Well, it's kind of funny because I have a different opinion, a little kind of liberal opinion on sponsorship, where uh, sponsorship is. They told me when I came into Fort Lauderdale Men's Group, and this was 1971, but they told me they said, Dan, you know, there's getting sober, there's staying sober. You got to get a sponsor to take you through the steps. And I read the big book, and you don't find the word sponsor in the first 164 pages of the big book. You know, the regular, it's supposed to be the heart and soul of AA. You know, those chapter one through the last chapter, and it's like, are they really? Okay, I read them over a week, a long weekend, that 164 pages. I remember coming back into the group and they said, did you get a chance to read a chapter or something? I said, no, I read the whole 164 pages. How did you do that? And I'm like, are you kidding? You know, I work in business. I have a degree from the University of Florida. I mean, I had to read through that stuff, you know. And I said, you won't find the word sponsor in there. You will find the word an understanding friend. And that's really I still believe that that's true. If you look at the success rate of Alcoholics Anonymous back in the 30s and into the 40s, something they were supposed to have a success rate of 50% get sober immediately. It says this in the big book, and another 25% get sober shortly thereafter. Well, that's a 75% success rate. Do you think we have a 75% success rate today?
No.
No, we don't. I think if you look it up through some of the statistics, which you can find on the internet, you know, they're saying no, it's probably more like 4 or 5%, you know, at the most. And I'm like, wait a minute, we used to have a 75%. Now we've got, is this what sponsorship has done for us? I don't know. But, you know, I think of that. It's one of the thoughts that comes into my head. And I'm like, what I believe is what the big book says, and where it says that what you need is an understanding friend and someone who's been through, especially someone who's been through it already, and they can share with you their experiences, strengths, and hope. And
I
that's you know,
I think that that's key. Exactly what you said. When I first got sober, like they say, get a sponsor. So I reached out and I got a sponsor, and maybe for a month, and I said, it's just, it's not maybe the right person for me, or maybe it's not the right time for me. And then, I was sitting in a meeting one day, and I heard you share. I
mm-hmm.
heard you share, and and after you were done speaking, I said, "Wow, I have a lot of similarities there." And yeah, I approached you after the meeting, and actually, Dan is my sponsor. He's been my sponsor for 9 months. But I think we have a different approach on it to sponsorship. Like you said, a trusted friend, and it's like you've been there, done that, and it's talking to the experience of one another, and really understanding that. I think that's the biggest um, key for me there, in sponsorship.
Right. And you meet, I talk to a lot of people. I'd say, well, where's your sponsor? Guy's got 10, 15 years. Well, I know I got 10, 15 years. And I'm like, you still have a sponsor, don't you? And he goes, yes. And I said, where is he? Well, he's in New York, where I'm from. And I thought, well, what, do you go fly up there every weekend, or you call him every day? And no, I mean, I've been sober. I said, right. I mean, part of the recovery to me and Alcoholics Anonymous is growing up and recognizing that, I don't have to run and call my sponsor on everything anymore. As far as my prayer life, I have people say, would you hit your knees first thing every morning? I said, no. They said, why? And I said, I just don't. But I said, I have an ongoing conversation with the God of my understanding, which also is through you people.
Mm-hmm.
When I mean you people, it's through the fellowship, men and women. I listen to them, and I take it to heart. I really do. I'll say, well, this happened to this guy. He did this, he did that, and then he's gone. And then I use that as more of a lesson. Uh, just, but there's getting sober and there's staying sober.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me in AA, you can have 1 year of sobriety 10 times over, or you can have 10 years of sobriety. And one of the things I like about you is you said you had 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And your story was kind of similar to what I was, and I thought, and you had a different attitude about it because you thought about it, just like what you're doing now.
Yeah.
You cared and you wanted to make it better. And I think you're well on the way to recovery. Not on the way, you're there.
Yeah, I think because that I seen what it means to progressive illness, that it is. From the time I was 20 to 27, I stopped. But then, one after that, I said, oh, maybe I can drink. Maybe this is not so bad. And then I seen how that progressive illness is like I never stopped drinking, and in the matter of a couple of years, how bad it turned, and I think from that understanding was a key point for me in understanding why I don't want to go back and don't want it to be that way.
And you know it, and I know it, is you almost pick up right where you left off.
Yeah.
I mean, not the very first day, maybe, but how quickly, it's like, well, I had a drink. It's kind of, I have to learn to control, and I start to think, wait a minute, you're talking like you did 20 years ago. I have to learn to control it all over again. No, Dan, just don't take the first freaking drink. This is silly. Don't play these games. This is your life. And, it's like a lot of things. You make one mistake, and you're dead.
Yeah.
And so why play it?
Why play it? Now we'll talk about growth and challenges. That we're on that. What were some of the biggest challenges in long-term sobriety?
The biggest challenges is actually trying to keep my anonymity because I had my own business for a while and people knew me. And one of my biggest things was, people were inviting me to parties and, hey, Dan, we're having a family thing. I dealt with, I, I have a background in accounting and taxes. So I did financial work for people, and I didn't want to tell people I was doing financial work for that. Hey, I go to AA, I don't know why, but a lot of people say, well, a lot of people, half of them are in the program too, and I said, you don't know that. But I just didn't want, I wanted to be a businessman with the people I did business with. I just didn't want that to be over, because I grew up in Florida pretty much. I've been here for a long time. And I didn't want that to spread into the community, business people and stuff that I know. Mm-hmm. So I just thought keeping that sort of, I don't know, there might be a way to handle it, but I haven't done it. If I had a sponsor that was a genius, maybe he could figure out, but.
Yeah, like you, I was born and raised in Florida, and so the anonymity was the biggest challenge. Do you feel like nowadays sobriety recovery is looked at the same way it was then, or?
No, I don't. I believe that you mean when Bill started it and all that. Well, he all kinds of stuff written about Bill and what's his name, some billionaire in New York, back Rockefeller or somebody wrote. They thought it was wonderful that there's something to help alcoholics because they didn't understand it back then, and but it was mainly men. Now it's mixed, which is nice. But I think that I don't know. I mean, I think the professional world, they might look down a little bit on. Would you want someone, a doctor that does heart surgery operating on you if you found out that he was going to AA?
No.
Right. Would you, now accounting and tax work is just paperwork, but if, would you want maybe if you had a big business, somebody that, you know, had a problem? Now, like I said, I can brag a little bit and say, well, hey, I'm going into my 28th year here. You know, I'm not going to walk out now and do something. Well, how do you know? You know, from what you're talking about, you know, if you listen to a lot of people in AA, they'll talk like it's just around the corner. Big bad bottle of whiskey's ready to jump down your throat the minute you turn your head. And I'm like, baloney. I don't believe it. Like Bill says, the problem has been removed. I don't think about it. And when I do, I kind of laugh. I'm like, I'm not going there. Get out of here. You know, I don't need it.
This may be off topic, but you were just saying this. So, do you think a relapse, if it were to happen, happens instantaneously, or is it something in the mind that happens before it even before that drink even gets poured or
Well,
anything?
it's kind of like a mental obsession
Hmm.
that someone keeps thinking that they start romancing the days of when they drank. Gee, I remember, you know, we used to go out, and, you know, and me and my buddies would go out and shoot pool, and we'd drink beer all night, and then we'd go to a strip joint or something, you know, and then go home or something, you know. And yeah, too bad. I had a friend. This actually happened to him. His name was Lynn, and they said I got a call one day. He was at a rehab. He was a, what do they have, like a rehab houses?
Yeah,
Yep.
residential.
He was the den mother or den father, whatever you want to call
Mhm.
him. And we were supposed to meet, and the guy called me up and he goes, "Hey Dan," he goes, "go to the Halloween party in Del Rey. They have a parade and everything." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "I heard these guys from New York are down there and they've got some blonde." And I said, "Blonde? What's that?" And he goes, "Heroin." And I thought, "Heroin? What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, I don't drink," but I said, anyways, I was supposed to pick him up. I called. They said, "Oh, he left. He said he was going to meet Dan." And I said, "Where?" "I am Dan. I'm supposed to pick him up. I was going to take him to dinner." I said, "You know, that was my plan." I didn't get a chance to do that. I called later that night. Has he come back yet? Has he come back? No. Why? Where is he? Well, if you go downtown, it's all crowded. You probably won't find him because it was packed, right? I thought, no, I'm not going down there. So next morning, I'm calling him at 6 in the morning, and the guy calls me back, and he said, "Lynn died last night, heroin overdose." And I was like, "What?" I couldn't believe it. He was 7 years clean, and you know, at a house. So it still lives in their head because alcohol. And you know, when I went to Fort Lauderdale Men's Group, we talked about drugs or anything. They used to say, "Well, don't talk about that because this is alcohol. Alcoholics Anonymous, not, you know, drug addiction anonymous." But now, if you go to Google and say, "Is alcohol a drug?" It pops back. Alcohol is a drug. You know, it's a drug, and I don't want to get back. I don't want to be a drug addict to alcohol. I want to be a slave to alcohol anymore, ever again, and I'm
You,
not.
you and me both. How do you stay connected to the program after so many years? How would you stay connected to AA or the program?
How would I take a?
How do you stay connected to the program after so many years?
I'm kind of.
Like maybe go to meetings or how's
I think I don't go. I don't go to as many meetings right now as I used to. I
Mhm.
tried to go every morning. I would go every morning for a while, mainly because it's relaxing. I thought I could be helpful to people, you know, give my interpretation of something. There's a lot of rigidity in some meetings where like, no, you must do this, and you know, God's got to do this for you. It hits your knees and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, if it works for you, why not do it? I mean, you know, whatever works. But um, I Alcoholics Anonymous now is part of my life. I like the philosophy of AA. I see people getting cured. I see people not getting cured. I don't want to use that word. That's a cuss word in AA. You're never cured. Well, Bill says that in the doc, and in, you know, into action, he talks about that. You know, you're never really cured of alcoholism. It's always there. Yeah, Dr. Bob said it's an allergy, and if I have an allergy, I have it for life, usually, right? So I'm like, I'm not going to toy with it. I know I've seen too many failures. Um, but AA, yeah, it's still very important in my life. I went to a meeting this morning. Didn't say anything, but I, on purpose, let the other people talk.
Hmm.
I mean, I know how it works, and I'm not concerned about it. I you know,
So, how do you see your role in AA? You just, how would you describe your role in AA?
well, I think that I'm someone that is can offer an alternative opinion to the. A lot of people have like a rigid plan to follow. You must hit your knees in the morning. I said, you mean hit my knees? And they said, no, you hit your knees, smarty. No, I'm like, I'm joking. I said, can't I pray sitting? Can I pray talking? I could be sitting on the toilet and talking to God if I want. I mean, is that God made me, so He knows everything, anyways. He knows what's going to happen before it happens, And they're like, oh, come on, Dan. And I said, no, come on, what? I said, I have faith that there's. If I don't want to drink, I don't have to. My role in AA today, I want to go to meetings and be able to offer an alternative opinion to people. Like, well, what you need to do is go to more meetings and eat more chocolate, or I mean, whatever that theory is. And I'm like, no, you don't have to do that either. I said, just come to the meeting, ask questions. Think about throwing your life away. I bring that up when they ask me, if someone asked me, well, you've been in the program, how would you stay so? How do you stay sober? I said, I just think about what would happen and what happened to my friend Lynn, because he wanted me to go with him that night in Delray. And he was like, Dan, have you ever tried that stuff? And I'm like, no, I've tried a lot of other stuff, but I'm not going to throw my life away. And that's the one thing I don't want to do, and I don't want to see anybody else do it. So my thing is to be out there and to be able to tell those stories and relate to them and let them know that they don't have to be so rigid in their recovery, but some people have to be. You hear them, they ask, how are you doing? And they go into recite, they recite a whole narrative for 10 minutes of talking. And I'm like, geez, you should really be talking to your sponsor about that. But okay, well, we'll have a meeting with 20, 30 people in it, and 5 people will talk about how wonderful they are in their program. And, I'm thinking, okay, isn't there any discipline in these rooms? You've seen me share, and I always say, try to keep it to 3 minutes.
Hmm. I think, like you said, it's more than just a repetition. It's a daily walk, and it's a constant
Right.
work on it. Than saying, "Oh, I just got to do this, do that, do this, and I'm good." It's more of intertwining it into daily life
Yeah.
and every day.
That people say, well, did you hit your knees? Did you hit your knees? And I'm like, oh, I didn't hit my knees. I got up and I said, I told you I had an ongoing conversation with the God of my understanding, which also speaks through the people that I know, like yourself. I said, I learn from all of that, and hopefully they learn from me, because we're sharing our experiences, strengths, and hopes with one another in order that we may solve our common problem, recover from alcoholism. Now it talks about that we will recover from alcoholism, and later in the book he says, no, you never recover. And I'm like, okay, Bill. It's one of those Bill Wilsonian things.
Awesome. Have you seen attitudes toward addiction or recovery shift in society within the AA itself?
Actually, I think that I'm seeing it shifting now more than ever, because this whole thing with the border, when the new president came in, he got really tough about, oh, we're not going to allow these drug dealers and all this stuff in there. And I started looking up articles on like what's happening in Texas and on our border. And there's more drugs than ever, and they've had more deaths and stuff. And I thought this could be catastrophic for our country. And I really believe that there's a change now going on, that people are starting to realize it, and that the women aren't having as many children. I mean, families aren't having as many children now and stuff, and that we could literally have a society that could start collapsing. I mean, this sounds political, but it's also, I tie it back into Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm thinking, gee, maybe we need an AA for the whole country. And because AA is flexible, you don't have to buy into some rigid ideology or program. It could be mellow, like they accept me in the rooms, but my ideation is a little different than a lot of other people.
I think that's important, and I think that's a great perspective to have and a great view, to not be stuck in one way of doing things. Um, now we'll just have like some reflection. And what advice would you give to someone just starting out in recovery?
I would tell them that this is a, I would tell someone new, welcome to AA. We're glad you're here, standard AA stuff, but I'd also tell them that this is a very serious disease. And, I've seen and heard and known many people who have died from this disease, people like ourselves. And I'm going back when I was in my 20s and 30s, and, having people die that young hits you pretty hard. You never think you're going to die. You think, or they used to say A's come in here and they have the titanium complex. Nothing can hurt them, right? Because I've done this and I've done that. Next thing you know, yeah, he OD'd last night, or he drank too much. I had a friend who ran off a bridge, and when he ran off the bridge, he went into a canal, and he was laying on the shore when they came, but he had ripped like part of his face off, and I'm like, that's a heavy price to pay. Does anyone really want to take that chance? Is alcohol that great? No. I mean, I would tell the new people, do it for 90 days and then come back and let's talk, or not, I mean, talk to everybody and talk as we go, but let's sit down and have a serious conversation after 90 days. If you can do it for 90 days, because a lot of people come in and they go, oh, I don't think I could do that. Why? Millions of people have come into AA and stopped. You can too. That would be my message to anyone out there. You can stop anytime you want to. You can get off the crazy train anytime you want to. People are like, oh no, more complicated. I'm like, it's really not. And talking to other people.
Awesome. What do you wish more people understood about AA or recovery?
That
Is there anything that you wish people understood more about AA or recovery?
I would like them to understand that it's a personal thing. Each person is different. So I can't sit in a room and say, well, try to do exactly what everybody else is doing, because everybody has a different education level, different life experiences. Some people are more addicted to hard drugs than they are, alcohol. You got a lot of people in AA that, when you get to know them, it's like, oh, so you had a big drinking problem. No, I was shooting up heroin or doing this and that. And I'm like, that's a lot different than anything I know. But that there's just different segments, just like there is in society. There's doctors and there's lawyers and there's garbage men and there's guys who cut lawns. I mean, they're all a little bit different, right? What's important to them, I think, is different. So I would approach everybody a little differently by getting to know them and being, like it says in AA, what we need is an understanding friend, and that's really what a sponsor is supposed to be. Someone who we understand each other and we know what our triggers are and that type of thing. I think that's a lot to do with recovery. Know thyself.
27 years. This has been really interesting. I appreciate your time so much. And yeah, we'll just close it out. And if you could talk to your younger self when you first got sober, what would you say?
If I could talk to my old self,
Your younger self, yeah. When you first got sober, what would you say?
I would probably say, hang in there, kid. It's worth it. Your life is worth it. Don't throw your life away. I mean, there might be reincarnation for all I know. There might be all kinds of things, but we know where we're at right now in this world, this dimension, right here, right now. And I don't have to drink if I don't want to, which means it's solely up to me, not up to my friends. It's not up to my parents or my girlfriend or anything. If I don't want to drink, I don't have to. I've lost a lot of friends who like to party because I was, that's how I got into it. But I would just say, no, thank you. And they told me, they said, Dan, you do the walk away. I said, the walk away. They said, you get up and you walk away. Say thanks, but no thanks, and walk away.
You got it here.
So,
Dan, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank all you out there.